I will go through quotas. There are two different quotas, basically. One related to the amount of compute hours you are entitled to spend, and the other one is related to how much information you're allowed to store, keep for a limited time. I just want to emphasize here what we are going to, during this session, try to address these questions and basically these objectives. I think those should be the main points of the discussion part. The plan is to present some aspects of a couple of tools we have for identifying how much you have, where you have it, and how much you can spend for about 20 minutes, and then go through the documentation with these questions and objectives in mind. Where you can also address questions, ask questions verbally or through the markdown document. And for that session, the recording will be turned off. So it's perfectly safe to ask questions without being taped. Yes, first, I want to address the quota. What is a quota and why is it needed? I will remind you of this restaurant allegory we used on day 1 and day 0. It kind of makes sense that if you share something that is not entirely unlimited, even though it seems to be rather large, some kind of restriction on how much you can use is sensible. So I basically just want to show how this is done and what is limited. So the why part, I hope to some extent makes sense. But I will start with the compute quota. We have a self-made tool called cost, which is basically showing all the available compute resources in terms of what we call CPU hours. This was addressed somewhat yesterday by Sabri, I think, which is our smallest, should I say, coin unit or billing unit. How much CPU hours do you have access to? And I almost said where. But there are some potential technical questions here. What is a project? Project is, for you, the project is, for most of you, the project is this NN9987K. Oh, sorry. 9987K. This is the project you are connected to for this course. But this is also, or the project has an account. So does the difference between an account and a project matter? And the answer is, of course, yes. Because a project also gives you some storage resources and a dedicated folder for this storage. I will address that on the storage part. But an account can be a bit confusing because you have an account for your billing units or your coins, and you have an account for logging in. We should look like this in a enterprise bookkeeping, large firm accounting manner, where, for instance, your home institution has an account for your research group, but there are many people having access to this account. So you have an account which contains your CPU hours, but you also have your personal account, basically allowing you to log in and to use from this CPU hour account, which is shared among many or more often than only yourself. Yeah, so it can be a bit confusing interacting, for instance, with support and also in discussions on the net. What is the difference? The difference is subtle, and sometimes it's implicit, sometimes it's hard to understand. Yeah, just this is how we regularly use it. You might find yourself in a situation where people talk about accounts and accounts, but we try to be consistent talking about project and account. Yes, there is a few issues with the cost command, and for those of you operating on a Mac newer than OS 10.13, you will find that this command doesn't work well. It works for me because I have changed the locale settings. I saw there was a previous question about this related to man module. And this is also the case for this. Now you see I get an error. So what I basically need to do for this to work is I need to set sorry for turning away. I have a cheat sheet somewhere. Yeah, I need to basically export the local settings. This is I think it's a rather Mac limited type of problem. I just wanted to address it since it was a question in the Markdown document. So you can use by cost. You can also have details, minus D or minus details. Hopefully you see the latter part of my my screen. The lower part of my screen. Speller. What this is giving you is a detailed printout of who has been using the shared accounts. And as you see, my user has spent 7 seconds yesterday, so I've been pretty lazy. Yeah, there are others who has been doing more. Standard for cost is -u, so you don't have to use the user flag. But if you want to look into a given project, for instance, you do cost -p, and you can do NN9987K. And that only gives you the current project. And as far as I've been able to find out, combination of flags, unfortunately, does not work for this version of cost, which is self-developed. Yes, now up to the other type of quota, which is the storage quota. We also have a tool for this. We have a self-developed tool called D-usage. And for me, it looks like this. path is basically explaining what area this is, this quota is, should I say, dedicated to, what folder this storage is dedicated to. So I have some on /cluster. My user has some in home, obviously. I have some in work. I have some in the current project. There are different areas of storage. I said obviously for home, because the standard setup in Linux is that every user get a personal area where they have their personal things. We call it home. And all users that have access to our machines have to be a member of a project. So you also have a project storage area. And then as a user, you also have a temporary work area, which we call work. So this is my private storage area. This is my temporary work storage area. And this is my project area within the current project we are using now. What does it matter where you store files? Well, your home area, as you see here, we have a soft limit. S means soft. We have a soft limit of 20 gigabytes. I have to be below that to have a backup on my files. And also, if I try to transfer a file from my laptop to this area, I might experience that I'm not allowed to store it on my home if I am close to or crossing this 20 gig limit. Sorry. The project area has a default limit of 1 terabyte, but it's shared among all the users. This can be elevated to up to 10 terabyte upon request. Above that requires extraordinary application from the project leader. Extraordinary. And these are both these areas, home and projects, are backed up, as you see here. Yes, backup. Yes, backup. For the work, the temporary work area, there is no backup. And as you also see, there is no quota. If we go back to the restaurant allegory, it's a bit like takeaway. The short area, which is meant for, or some tables at the entrance for those who just want to drop in for a cup of coffee and a dessert. So currently, we haven't had a need for having a quota, but it's also regularly cleaned up. So you need to be, if you want to keep your files, you need to move them from this area. Unless, if you forget to do that and go away on a very, very long vacation, you might risk coming back and realize that, oh crap, my files are gone. And it has to be in this way if we are to keep no quota limit on this area. And the reason why we have a no quota limit is because sometimes when you do a rather aggressive type calculation, the temporary files are very large. Within my field of knowledge, chemistry, you can have temporary files of several terabytes. If you work with bioinformatics databases and want to change the database, you can risk having the full database twice in memory or stored to disk temporarily, which also can generate data in that area or that range of size. So having a quota and having backup of this would risk us taking care of or storing a very, very high level of a high amount of temporary data. For two of our machines, Saga and From, there are some technicalities connected to this storage. And I'll show you now a rather peculiar one. If you pay attention now to the quota on my home, this is 1.3. The space I've used is now 1.3 gigabytes. Now I will move into my project. Account, where I have two files. If I use this, I have 56 gigabytes. If I move to home, using another way of finding how much I have stored, I have only 1.4, which is, which aligns to this number here. So I'll go back, and what I'm going to do now, if you see my files here, for instance, this file here is owned by me, but it has an NN9987K group ownership. So I will change this ownership to me, and my main group. If I go back, nothing has changed in my home. But have a look at this. Oh, wow. My home contains 29.3 gigabytes. How's that possible? I didn't move anything. The cost to this is that on From and Saga, you are charged for storage according to the ownership of the files. So moving a file from home to projects or from home to work does not change the charge. So you also have to change the ownership of the file, basically the group ownership of the file, according to the group ownerships of the area you move it to. So moving a file is not sufficient. You also have to change the file ownership group. So what I'm going to do now is basically I can do just change group, ch group, and I'll change it to just, I can change it back, but I can change it to just my username, because if you see here, I have a few groups. I have my main group is my user. But I also have this group here, which is basically the ownership of the groups in home. So if I make a file in home, it will have the the underscore username underscore G name as owner. If I make a file in projects, it will have the project number as owner. And if I make a file in work, it will have my username as owner. But if I move a file that I have made elsewhere, I need to remember to change the ownership of the file. Yes, I think unless I'll finish what I started first. I go back to if you see here, this file is owned by this etus 00_G. Owner, sorry, username _G. So if I go back now, just to check, still I have 29.3 gigabytes. If I now do a change group of this, I need to check for both. Yes. If I now do the usage, you see that my home folder is now down to 1.3 gigabytes. And it is now also back within the backup region. So basically, that is what I plan to say about these two commands. Siri, did I miss anything?
Maybe you could say one word about the number of files as well.
Ah, yes, good point. That's a fairly good point. But a very important point, especially for those within bioinformatics. You have a tendency of having many files, but not necessarily large files. So because there is an alternative quota, not only information, but also the number of files or the number of inodes to a system. The quota on home is 100,000 files. That's your limit. The default number on projects is typically 1 million files per terabyte. So you also need to remember removing files may not be enough if you're above the number of file quota. You also need to have a brief look at that. Siri, is that because the inodes used to be a bit tricky in the past, taking a day or so to update the machinery so you got under the limit? Is it immediate now, or is it still taking some time when you move or remove files?
I'm not really sure. I guess you can also test if you have.
I can test it, of course. Yeah, I'll go to my home and do. So now if I do, I have this many files in my home. And if I do I should have yes, it works immediately. That's useful to see. See here now, I created 10 files, I removed 10 files, and the number has dropped with 10. That's very good news. So you need to remember also sometimes to have a look at the quota for files, number of files, not only for how much information, how many gigabytes you have. Great. Anything else? Then I suggest we turn off the recording and move into the discussion part.